the meltdown on the establishment right and the Trump-hating left over the volatility caused by Trump's change in tariffs is everywhere. Good luck tuning into a podcast, a television show, picking up a paper without being told how terrible these decisions are and how Trump doesn't know what he's doing. You actively have to work to find somebody like you who says, let me tell you another way of looking at this, and try to disabuse some of these establishment types of their very, very well-held wisdom. So VDH, your thoughts on the tariffs?
Well, there is a lot of misinformation. The first thing is that I know this, I'm like you, I have a 401k and it's been really hurt, but Donald Trump did everything Wall Street wanted his first term. He repealed Dodd-Frank, he deregulated, he cut taxes, he encouraged accelerated depreciation, and the market went up, Megyn, 65% under Donald Trump, higher than even Biden, even though that he suffered through the COVID. So I was looking at the Dow when it's 37 or 38,000. It's pretty much where Biden was in 2023. And over the Biden and Trump 8 years, it's gone up 100%. It's gone from 1,800 when Trump first entered office up to 38 low point. But if you look at wages, and this is what it's all about, even though the productivity over the last 50 years has almost doubled per worker, wages only went up 35%. Now, as far as the psychodrama goes, you and I are elites and we understand that, but 10% of the country owns 93% of the value of the stock market. 50% are only invested at 1%. So a lot of this paranoia is that these people are not making over a 10-year period what they think to deserve. In other words, their portfolios over the last decade went up by 80% and no longer at this particular point have doubled into 100%. But they're not interested on the people below who would have dreamed of having wage returns to be comparable to the stock market. The other thing is, and I don't understand this, that they are not offering any constructive alternative. I keep thinking, well, maybe the left, and I remember Bernie Sanders and Nancy Pelosi said that our policy toward China was a job loser. I remember Paul Krugman said he was a mercantilist. I can remember Warren Buffett writing that we are being wiped out that was 20 years ago, by asymmetrical trade. So I'm waiting for all these voices to come up and say, no, this is what we should do to address the $1 trillion annual trade deficit, or the trade deficits that have been, without exception, continuous since 1975, for a half century. They can either say, well, trade deficits don't matter, and I'll tell you why. Or here's a better way of doing it. Or, yes, we're paying $3 billion a day in interest on the national debt, but here's what I would do. Or here's how I'm going to get to. They don't do any of that, especially the left. So it's just, and then when you look at the whole totality of the Trump 80 days, it's, well, we went from 10,000 a day to zero on the border. Nobody said that was possible. We've already identified $150 billion that everybody on both sides admits is probably waste and fraud already. For the first time in a decade, you can navigate through the Red Sea. The Houthis are pretty much in withdrawal. Iran is completely emasculated. And somebody's talking about ending the Ukraine war, which instead of just, we'll give them whatever it takes to the end. So there's been dramatic changes that there's no appreciation. And one last thing, I think workers understand that even if they don't buy stock in the company in which they work, the stock market is important. Donald Trump used to brag that he had raised it 60% his first time, and people said, the stock market, that's not a good barometer, workers' wages and unemployment. But Donald Trump already had provided this week, you think the stock market would take note, 100,000 more jobs than the government said would be produced. And the interest rate at an annual rate, maybe at this month, is about to 5%. And so he's getting to some data. And then you think, well, given this hysteria by the 10% in the media and academia and politics and the corporate world, he's done for. And then you look at the Harvard-Harris poll, and he's still 49, 46, down a point or two. So I guess what I'm saying is for me, I like to do exactly what you said. Take a deep breath and then contextualize this with the Russian collusion hoax that we all said was a fake and were not disbelieved, the COVID lockdown debacle, the Hunter laptop disinformation fable, the lie that Joe Biden was fit as a fiddle, the idea that Kamala Harris had closed the distance and she was 3 points ahead in Iowa and going to win that. And these all were these psychodramas that turned out to be not what they were. So, and finally, one last rant. They keep talking about tariffs, recession, depression. I can't think of a tariff that caused a major recession of depression. It didn't cause the 2008. That was Wall Street. That was this reckless Wall Street hysteria that we're seeing now, only channeled into subprime mortgage securitization in the market when there wasn't capital there that they said there was. The Smoot-Hawley Act did not cause the Great Depression. We had a surplus at the time. It was unnecessary, yes. It was punitive, yes. But it was 2 years after, when it fully was implemented, it was 2 years after. What? Who caused the Great Depression? Buying on the margin and reckless Wall Street investors. So it's kind of ironic that Wall Street has a tendency to go bananas, speculate, and hurt the rest of us. And now they're trying to cite Smoot-Hawley that had nothing to do with the Depression, and they should look to themselves. And the final thing is, if they think there's going to be help from the Democrats on deregulation, tax reduction, investment, protecting American companies, dealing with the debt, dealing with the deficit, I don't think there is. Nothing's coming out of the left. Everything that's coming out of the left is antithetical to what the Wall Street Journal, for example, believes. So I just would like to hear what their alternative scenario is. Donald Trump's communication, I would only suggest to them that he have a tragic tone. He should, instead of saying beautiful tariffs and we're going to make them pay, or Europe has been ripping us off, or repertory, he should say, I didn't want to do this, but we've had 50 years of this and nobody draw anybody's attention to it. They offshoring, they outsourcing, that has destroyed the industrial base of this country. I don't like cutting federal workers, but who had ever cared about the $37 trillion debt? Who cares about the $3 billion in interest per day? I was tasked to do this in a way that nobody else has addressed it. I don't like doing it, but I'm going to do it for the good of the country, even though I'm going to be hated for doing it. If he said that, I think it'd be... The other thing he could say is, he's got to cease all the talk about repertory tariffs, where he says, well, we're going to make them pay for all the stuff they did in the past, or they manipulate the currency. True. They use health and safety gimmicks to forbid import. True. But for right now, at this moment, he's got to talk about reciprocity, that American people will back him the whole way if he just says, I would like zero tariffs with partners, and barring that, I want our tariffs to be what their tariffs are. And just stop all the talk about we're going to have a 10% on everybody regardless, or we're going to tariff Australia even though they have a trade deficit with us. He can get in the second round to the currency manipulation, the VAT tax, the scams that countries use to say your products aren't clean enough or they may have disease.
Exactly.
All of that. But for right now, the American people just want to do unto others as they do to us. And they will back him to the end of the earth when he makes the argument, it's on autopilot. The fate is in these people's hands. If China wants to be happy, then just do tariff what we do, or I'll go with them on zero tariff. That's a winning argument, but not, well, Australia had a 2003 little quirk and they stopped beef. That's too intricate right now. Australia has basically zero tariffs. They run a deficit with us. We should not be tariffing them.
The Chinese that's a special case. And it's amazing, like the disparity in terms of what they import to us versus what we import to them. And, people have been talking about, Trump really added a lot of tariffs on them, 37% on top of the pre-existing tariffs that were already there under Trump 1.0 that Biden claimed to hate, but then kept in place. And it affects virtually nothing because they don't buy from us. So it's almost just an exercise. And it's like a thought exercise because compared to what we buy from them, they buy next to nothing from us. But today, they actually had the nerve to issue a retaliatory tariff after Trump's 34%. And Trump just issued this statement on Truth Social. He writes, yesterday, China issued retaliatory tariffs of 34% on top of their already record-setting tariffs, non-monetary tariffs, illegal subsidization of companies, and massive long-term currency manipulation. Despite my warning that any country that retaliates against the U.S. by issuing additional tariffs above and beyond their already existing long-term tariffs, a tariff abuse of our nation, will be immediately met with new and substantially higher tariffs over and above those initially set. Therefore, if China does not withdraw its 34% increase above their already long-term trading abuses by tomorrow, April 8th, 2025, the U.S. will impose additional tariffs on China of 50%, effective April 9th. Additionally, all talks with China concerning their requested meetings with us will be terminated. Negotiations with other countries, which have also requested meetings, will begin taking place immediately. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So let's talk about China because, the general thinking seems to be what's going to happen in North America is ultimately going to be done by deal between Trump, Canada, and Mexico. That, he already struck a deal with them first time around, and they'll probably strike another deal because we're all on the same continent and we have an interest in having healthy trading relationships with our upstairs and downstairs neighbors. Then there's Europe, which now is, acting as a bloc, some 27 countries. And I think the general wisdom is that we'll reach a deal with them too. Some sort of a deal, like maybe this is a negotiation to hit something better. So it's really about Asia. These tariffs are about, in large part, about Asia. And China, the number one, where there's this huge disparity. And then when we hit them with tariffs last time around, they outsourced a lot of their manufacturing to some of these other Asian countries like Vietnam. We're like, oh, okay, we don't have to do it here. China said, we'll do it in Vietnam. They're not subject to the new increased tariffs on us. So now Trump has included Vietnam and all these smaller Asian countries in his net. So I don't think it's any accident that he's making an example out of China with this Truth Social post, Victor. And I think he's right on because I think Americans understand on an inherent level that everything we buy was made in China. You can't avoid it if you try. From food to toys to clothes, the electronics, you name it. They make it there. They export it to America, and we pay through the nose for it. And now Trump's trying to right that balance by bringing American manufacturing back and decreasing our dependence on this country that hates us. Your thoughts on Asia and China and how that all plays in here?
Well, traditionally in these trade wars, the country that is running a big surplus is more vulnerable because their industry and their economy has been geared toward mercantilism. And that's true, especially of China. The second thing is there's going to be a lot of opportunistic countries, Vietnam in particular, that are going to come to us and say, we can do what China's doing to you, and we will give you a better deal. We'll have reciprocal tariffs with you. But if you go after China, we're here, and they're going to pop up. It's kind of like musical chairs. If the music goes off, everybody wants a chair. Once he starts to do these deals, a lot of countries will say, if I don't cut a deal with him, I'll be the last one to get into the American market. And so China is vulnerable in that aspect. They also have 300,000 students here. We don't have hardly any there. They are buying hundreds of thousands of farmland in strategically located places. The FBI, CIA has estimated that 1%, and that was very generous, of students and people from China on green cards are actively engaged in espionage. That could be 3,000 or 4,000 people. So my point is this, is that they see us as naive and is ripe for exploitation in 360-degree thinking. If Trump gets into a tiff with him as he is now, he has all sorts of levers. He could say to China tomorrow, we're restricting the number of Chinese students that are coming to the United States by 100,000. They would go ballistic. And so would the universities who are using those and charging them 110% as a way of cash to subsidize a lot of the things they shouldn't be doing.
Tariff wars, stubborn inflation. No wonder gold has been routinely hitting all-time highs. And volatile markets like the one we have now don't sit on the sidelines with your head in the sand. You can take control and safeguard your savings. Aren't you thinking about that today? That's why so many Americans today are turning to Birch Gold Group. They've helped tens of thousands convert an existing IRA or 401k into one in physical gold. Is it time for you to hedge against economic instability or market instability with gold? To learn how to own physical gold in a tax-sheltered account, text MK to the number 989898. Birch Gold will send you a free, no-obligation info kit. Again, just text MK to the number 989898. With an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau and countless five-star reviews, Birch Gold has helped many protect their savings with gold. It took us decades to get into the tangled mess we're trying to unpack right now. How long will it take to get out of it? And at what cost? Text MK to 989898 today. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.